Ahoy, mateys! This is your captain speaking, Captain Keaton. And I'm here today with Brian of I Got Kings to interview him on what his experience is like, was like, and will continue to be like with Zelda II. Welcome, Brian.
Welcome, Captain Keaton. Thanks for having me back. I feel honored to be back to talk about Zelda 2 after just talking about Zelda 1. I am so honored. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It was great. A
Zelda
great
2.
start to the channel. You were the first interview, and you will be the first interview for Zelda 2. The Adventure of Link. So exciting.
Mm-hmm. It is a game that I really, really, really like. And I hope I can share that with you in a good way, in a understandable way.
You definitely will. I mean, there was a good reception to the first interview, but for those who haven't seen it, go watch the interview. It is the NES Zelda interview, and I believe I titled it Zelda was one of many NES games. Any thoughts or comments reflecting on the episode now that it's been out?
Oh no, that's pretty good. I like the title because it just does. I know we were talking about Zelda, but I wanted to just put in there that like when the NES was coming out, these games were coming out rapid fire, and Zelda was one of them. They kind of we played and we liked, but there were so many coming out at the time that it was just we took it for granted almost. And now that it's still, yeah, I think Zelda 1 is still relevant. It's just I wanted to keep that in there. I thought that was a good observation on your part to title it that.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I feel like it was the theme of the episode, and you're kind of the NES guy, so it's nice to hear your perspective on kind of how Zelda compares to the NES games then and even nowadays. 2020 hindsight.
Yeah. Thank you. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Well, before we get into it, viewers at home, go check out Brian of I Got Kings on YouTube and Twitch if you haven't already. He's always streaming day and night.
Yeah.
Are there
usually,
any games that you are streaming or plan to stream in the near future? I know this will go up like 3 weeks later, but it'll be an interesting time capsule.
Yeah, I just finished playing Goemon 2 on the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom. The Legend of the Mystical Ninja on Super Nintendo was the game we got, but there was actually 4 Goemon games for the Super Nintendo. This was the second one. Quite enjoyed it. I'll be playing probably I don't really know. It's like up in there. I usually pick just like what do I feel like playing and just pick it and play it, and go through it. I did play through a new Adventure Island. That's probably the easiest Adventure Island. So if you want to play an easy Adventure Island game, play New Adventure Island.
Yeah, I remember you talking about the original Adventure Island. Like, if you like a good game with challenge.
One of the hardest NES games to go through. It's just brutal.
That's crazy because it's so iconic. For me, so many people talk about Adventure Island.
Yeah, the second and third one are much more fair than the first one.
Okay,
for sure. It's a fun game, but it's a lot of I had to leave my NES on for like a day because I didn't want to lose my progress. And that's a part of the course for all NES games. As a kid, you used to have to just leave the NES on, go to the school, turn off the power on your TV, leave the NES running, hope your mom doesn't bump it with a vacuum or something and cause it to lose your progress. And I do that with games now. Like I had to do that with Plock to beat it because Plock is tough, and I did that with a lot of NES games. High Seas Havoc, I had to do that too. When there's no continue, leave the game on overnight.
That's too funny, man. And fortunately, the game in question today is one of those games that you don't have to do that with because it had a save battery, as did the first Zelda game. So I think that's a good point as any to transition into Zelda 2. So, Brian, I want to start off by asking you, what was your first exposure to Zelda 2?
Well, I didn't have it growing up. My friends didn't have it, but I remember playing it. I think it came out in '88. So I would play. It was hard to get in '88 from what I hear. I don't remember it, so it would probably, if that's the case, it was hard to get. I probably played it in '89 or '90. I wish I remembered where I played it. If it was at a friend's house or we rented it. I know none of my friends had it, so it had to have been a rental, or maybe one of a friend has played it. and I remember just playing it and not knowing what to do. I think I got to the first palace, maybe beat the first palace, and that's probably my experience with Zelda 2. I didn't play it because I didn't have it. I had Zelda 1, and that's the one I played. But Zelda 2, I was not familiar with, other than Nintendo Power covered it. And in later issues, in the news section, you'd see tips on how do I get past this palace? Where do I find the boots? And you'd see it there. So that's my experience with Zelda 2. I didn't have it, didn't play it much, other than somewhere I played it, because I remember playing it, but I just can't remember where or when or how. Was it a rental or whatever?
That's pretty interesting. So at the time, did it make an impression?
Yeah, the music definitely made an impression. The fact that I thought it was one of the most beautiful NES games. I love how Link looks in it. He's like tall. He looks like an elf, but he looks like it's very medieval looking to it. I love the thing that really lays the impression is when you start the game, you have Zelda or a girl. I didn't know if I knew it was Zelda at the time. And in the background, the title screen when it pops up with the sword in the cliff is great. The opening theme for the title screen really left an impression. Just the fact that you kind of walk out and you're on a top-down map like Dragon Warrior. I think this game was very much inspired by Dragon Warrior. I think Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior was huge, and I think at Nintendo, I believe they were taking bits and pieces from Dragon Quest, and they took the top-down world and the kind of like experience system from Dragon Quest, because it does look like a Dragon Quest overworld on Zelda 2's map. That left an impression on me. Because I believe I would have played this before I got Dragon Quest. Because I got Dragon Quest in 90, and this came out in 88, 89. So this is my first experience with that kind of top-down RPG kind of thing, would have been Zelda 2. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. I think I played this before Dragon Warrior. So
That
this was
makes
kind of...
sense. This game, as with like all the NES games, it seems like the gap between the Japan release and the America release was at least a year. So in North America, this game came out in December of 1988, and in Japan it was January of 1987. So almost 2 full years. I believe with Dragon Warrior it was the same. It was 86 and 88. I'll look it up.
I
Real
think
quick.
Dragon Quest here was 89. We got it in 89 here. So when we got it, I think it was 86. It was like 4 years old. So it... One of the reasons it probably didn't catch on was they touched it up. Well, we're not talking about Dragon Quest, but they touched it up a lot, the NES North American version of Dragon Quest. But the point is that Zelda 2, when it came out in Japan, Dragon Quest was already out. So it would have taken inspiration from how big Dragon Quest was for the RPG elements, the overworld and stuff like that. I think they had to have taken from there, I would think. Miyamoto and their team.
Does that make sense, though? Because if the Japan release for Dragon Quest is 86.
I believe
no, it does make sense. Yeah. Okay. I'm getting the timelines. I'm understanding it. So they had a full year to at least work with it.
Yeah, a lot of these early NES games, when Dragon Quest took off, a lot of them took inspiration from that, and this one is one of them.
For sure.
And
you are a big Dragon Quest fan, for those who don't know. I personally also love Dragon Quest, as you know, but others may not.
Yeah, oh yeah, you're a huge Dragon Quest fan. I like that we could link them together.
Yeah, link them through the Zelda timelines somehow. Zelda's Dragon Quest timeline. So you were exposed to it around its original release. However, you didn't own it. You didn't really get to sink your teeth into it. When was it that you did get to really indulge in the Zelda 2 experience?
I played it for the first time around 2015. I actually gave it a shot and I beat it. And around 2015 is when I sat down and said, I'm going to beat Legend of Zelda. And I actually did it. I went through and I think I did it. I think I had to look up where some of the heart pieces were.
That makes sense.
And there's one part in the game where there's a certain don't well for spoiling a game. There's a certain spell you get that you don't know what it does, and I didn't know what it did, so I had to look on that on what to do. So there was a few things I had to look up, but I don't really think that is it is a it's isn't hard. Like if you're gonna get stuck in a game, I have no problem using a guide if you're gonna put the game down. Especially since back then we would have had Nintendo Power telling us and magazines, or Nintendo Power telling us what to do anyway. So I have no trouble using a guide for if I'm really stuck and I want to get through the game.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, with these Zelda games, they're pretty stringent with the requirements to progress. With Zelda 1, I don't think it was as bad unless you wanted the fully upgraded sword, which I mean comes in handy because you have the heart piece requirement. With this one, there's a lady that's like, "Did you find the 7 magic containers?" And if you didn't, you can't get that spell in order to. It's
Yeah, it's
called
just called spell.
Great. The
Yeah,
ran out of
it's a
inspiration by that
see
point.
what it does. Yeah, it's kind of just called spell, so you don't know what it does.
Right.
I think yeah. So so
I guess hold on
yeah.
a
So
second.
I
The
first
reason that I
yeah
brought that
sure.
up is just because when it comes to finding things like those magic containers, it can be so cryptic. Like their locations, and we're going into spoilers. If you haven't played this game and you want to go in fresh, you won't find them. Like you will not find them on your own. You will not find the one above the Ocean Palace. You're just going to
Yeah,
stumble
that the
onto that
one
one.
there's one and yeah, there's one in the water. You got to use the boots to walk across, up and around. And there's this path. It's hidden once you get the boots. You kind of have to take. And it took me a lot of fun that one. There's certain areas, tiles on the screen where you got to go out of the way and go through some enemies, and you just go on a blank tile and you appear right there with where there's a heart piece or something. Um, Stuff like that. There's some that are hidden behind like a rock that you break. That could be a heart or a magic container. I forget, um, but when the game was out, you just explored and you did it. You had Nintendo Power that would tell you, but you kind of just played the game and you found out through doing it.
That's true.
And the game is not really that long, so it's a way to like extend the gameplay too, to find these things, kind of hide these little trinkets around. And I think some parts of the game maybe were made to extend the gameplay. Like when you die in a palace, you go back to the whole the way to the beginning. We were talking about that earlier, which is a real kick in the tuchus, because you want to get right back there, but you have to see, hi Zelda, how you doing? I'm gonna go this way. You sleep for a while. I got to go back to this dungeon, and you're going all the way back, to where you get, and you gotta get there, and then you gotta go through, and but it's a bad thing, but it's a good thing, because when you're in those dungeons and you're fighting and you have to ration your health, and you're like, oh man, I have this much health. Come on, it feels so good when you beat an enemy and you get like a magic drop, or you find a magic drop in a statue up there, and it allows you to go further and further, and then you beat that palace, and you're like, oh yes, yes, yes. You feel so good because you know that if you die, you have to go the whole way back, and it just ups the stakes for you. So it's a very rewarding game in that sense. Where if they would have just took you back to the beginning of the palace, well, you can just keep going and keep going. I wish they kind of would have put you at the beginning of the palace though, but I kind of see why they did it that way, to give the game some more length, probably, I would guess, and then to give it more of a challenge, which I don't think that giving you like that kind of a challenge is needed, because we'll get into the combat. The combat in this game is very specific, and if you're doing it the way they want you to do it, it's a pretty brutal combat system. Very rewarding, but pretty brutal. I don't think they had to go to that extent of making you continue the whole way back at Mrs. Zelda there, but I could see why they might have done it that way.
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of just use this as a launching point to just talk about overall thoughts and feelings on Zelda 2. I mean, when it comes to the points that you mentioned, I agree that it is very rewarding, not just like completing things in combat, but even stumbling on the next dungeons. I actually didn't need a guide to find any of them, and I was shocked. You know, in Zelda 1, I really liked Zelda 1, and I appreciate it, but there were some of them I would not have found, you know, had it not been for going out of my way to do so. In this
Mhm,
one,
mhm.
I like I got the boots and I just started walking on water accidentally, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, that's awesome."
yeah. And
There,
it kind of like leads you there because there's like a little dock, and you go,
right?
oh, what can I do here? And you just walk right off. Oh, I can walk on water. That's what they. And you had the instruction manual too, so it would kind of put that to you. But sorry, go right ahead. Sorry to
No, that's
interrupt.
okay. So I think that it's rewarding not just in terms of combat, but also exploration. Now, combat definitely. I think the thing that makes it really felt, at least for the North American version. I'm not speaking on the Japanese one. I have a guy that's going to come on soon to talk about the Famicom Disk System and how the combat's a
Oh.
little different. But for the North American version, if you game over, you lose all of your XP that you got. And that's the
Mhm,
that's the kick in the tickets for me, because it's like
mhm.
you spend all that time grinding, looking forward to leveling up, but your life count's dwindling because these guys are wrecking you. I'm thinking Iron Knuckles at the start of the game. You know, they give me some trouble. You got to really
Yeah,
time your jumps and everything with them, and
and you said,
nothing
yeah,
sucks
yeah.
more than getting like almost 500 XP and then losing it all and going like,
Mhm. Yeah.
I got to
You're
regrind
like,
that.
oh, you're just so deflated. Uh, you almost learn to time your level ups in this game. You have to kind of time your level ups. If you can get to a palace and you're about to level up and you're near the end and you level up and then you fight and beat the boss, then you get 2 level ups. And it's great because you almost have to like time your level ups, like I just said that. But if you can get into a palace with almost leveling up and then beat that palace, because you get a free level up at the end of the palace, so you get 2 level ups there. That's a huge boost to you. But yeah, it's very very rewarding to get that level up because that helps. Like you really do feel the level ups, like much like in Dragon Quest, you feel the level ups. They really help you quite a lot in the game, especially attack. Attack in this game is very important because if you can kill stuff faster, well, then you don't have as much trouble. It doesn't stay long enough to hurt you as much.
Let's talk about the leveling up system, because this is so unique to Zelda 2 compared to the rest of the series. What are your overall thoughts on the leveling system compared to the rest of the series?
Oh, well, I don't think there's anything else like it in the series because you actually gain experience and gain levels and get, I guess, your heart, there are hearts that increase, but you increase your life after a certain level, increase your magic and that. I love it. I think I wish we would have more. I wish they would go back more to this style for a Zelda game, uh, like a 2D uh, side scroller Zelda game with this level up system would be great. Um, I just think it's nice to be because in RPGs, if you're stuck, you can always grind and get stronger. Um, I think in Zelda 2, I think some of the enemy you have to kind of pick your grinding spots because some enemies aren't worth the experience. Like the when you get further on, you need 1,500, 2,000 experience. You're not going to grind little octa rocks because they give too little. So you have to find an area where you can grind where the guys give you 50, 100, and that you can fight them pretty reliably without taking a lot of damage. Um, so I think if they take that and they kind of make it more, make the enemies give you more experience, balance it better, so you don't have to like search for those hard because I still don't know a good place in Zelda 2 to grind for enemies. Usually, I think
Southern hemisphere, where there's like some dino
Southern.
folks. And it's like if you get the slime enemy on the overworld, that's a great place because they give 150 each, and two of them come on screen. So
Oh,
every encounter you get, you're getting 300.
Southern. So like the part with not Death Mountain. You're not talking about.
No, go to the right of Death Mountain. You need the flute. I want to call it ocarina. The flute at that point to access that part of the map. But once you do, that's
Oh,
where the run right now will be.
behind the spider.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
in the
gotcha.
forest area. You gotta go
Okay.
to the woods. But let's just stick with before we get to like kind of tips and tricks, like overall feelings. So you appreciate the RPG system.
Yeah, I really like it a lot. I wish they'd bring it back for more Zelda games. I think like Zelda 1, I consider Zelda 1 an RPG. I know a lot of people don't, but it's kind of has like some RPG moves. Zelda 2 just expands even more on that. It's the most RPG-ish of the Zelda games. And I think that's a good thing. I wish they would go back more to it. Um,
Okay, so
I
it's
think
a couple words that I think are coming up. It's satisfying. Satisfying game to play. It's
yeah.
challenging, and it's I don't know, like I don't know the word to use, but it's the RPG elements are appreciated for how they've expanded from the first game.
Yeah, because I think there's not really a lot of another game like Zelda 2 in the Zelda series. It's almost like a completely different game. And I mean, there's still, if you look at Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, you wouldn't really tell they're related almost, except in name and maybe some characters and stuff. But I think it's appreciated. I think the game in general is very rewarding and very replayable. You can do different like if you want to make the game harder on yourself, you can skip your level ups of your sword and just do your magic and health. There's ways to do that. So yeah, the level up system. I just wish that the enemies gave more experience. I
Okay,
think that would, but that I just wish they gave more experience so you didn't have to find these grinding spots.
sure. Yeah, I mean that would definitely help with some of the earlier dungeons if they're giving you a hard time.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's do a more direct comparison. We've been kind of talking about it, but Zelda 1 versus Zelda 2, how do these two compare to you?
Well, they're like I said, they're different. Um, Zelda one I was talking about, I still think it's an RPG. Zelda 2 just improves upon, they add more RPG because you actually get levels. The levels are, they increase your attack power, magic, or health, and you can increase your health with, heart containers as well, and magic uh, containers too. Um, but I think how do they compare? It's hard. This one is more. It's almost like the world of Zelda 2 is more like to get places. It's almost like Metroid because you got to have the 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 hammer to break the rocks, and then you can make a shortcut through to the other path. You get the boots. You can walk on the water to get to the palace.
Hmm.
You can get the whistle, and then you can go further, and it makes going back to those areas when you do die at the palace a little quicker. Zelda 1, you had the raft, I guess, and you could kind of go to different areas. But there was nothing really gating you other than like the raft to get to the one palace. I think you needed the whistle to get to the one palace. And there was a palace, you had to get the armlet to open the one, get into one, I think. But it's kind of, in that way, they're kind of similar. Um, I think the enemies are still the same. There's still Octo Rocks. You still got your moblins. They just look in 2D now, which is kind of cool to see them in 2D instead of just a top down like looking over them. Like the little Octo Rocks are pretty cool looking. I think there's the little things that jump and spit the rocks at you, and then the moblins look cool with their little spears sticking out. So the enemies are still there. Um, the battle system is completely different. Zelda 1 was very basic, but very like I think you mentioned in our previous video, or maybe talking to you, you said it's almost like a shooter because when you get to the Dark Nuts stages, you're kind of bouncing around between all these enemies, swinging your sword. Zelda 2 is different in that it's almost like if you play the game without like jumping up and hitting the enemies on top of their head to hit them and kill them quickly, you have to use your shield to block all their attacks. So it's almost like you're very much into the game. Like, oh my god, I got to block this, and then you got to take your shots. It's very thrilling, and it really gets to you. You're like really into the game. You got to really pay attention because it can be brutal. The combat in Zelda 2, Zelda 1 can be brutal too when you have all the enemies. Zelda 1 is a lot about situations. You have maybe a Wizrobe over here firing at you, and you got a Dark Nut over here. You got the bubbles that take away your sword. Zelda 2 is all about one-on-one combat and kind of dealing with who's in front of you and like blocking high, low. Do I use shield? Always use shield. Shield's it's not expensive.
Always,
You can
yeah.
always catch. Yeah. The magic system in Zelda 1, there's no magic system in Zelda 2. And I will say the magic system in Zelda 2 is probably the most important magic system. I think you mentioned this in your stream I saw. It's the most important magic system of the Zelda games. I agree with that. Because you have to use that magic to beat the game. There's no, I mean, there's people who can get through the game without using shield probably, but it makes the game very, 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 much easier if you use shield and a way to restore your life. I guess that would be like the potion. The potion in Zelda 1 would almost be like the Zelda 2 life spell. The fairy spell is kind of cool because you can fit through little keyholes. If you don't have a key, you can skip it and go right through the door key there. Which is kind of cool. They thought about that. I don't know if the Japan version does that or not, but I'd be interested if your next guest, if he does that. What else? What else can I think of? There is a whistle, but this one doesn't warp you to the dungeon entrances. It just kills the one spider that's needed to break the path to get to the southern lands, like you said. The raft is there because you can go across the little do, that little jingle, and then you go across. That's kind of cool, and that's where you use the raft. So there are similarities in the items and the enemies you fight, but everything else about the game, it's more about one-on-one fighting, picking your spots onto when to attack, like strategizing your level ups. Picking if you want to skip your next upgrade, your next level up, and go straight to the next one, which is attack, and level up your attack. Or just exploring the land and finding the little heart pieces, which is still that part's much like I guess you don't bomb anything, but bombing in Zelda 1 would be the equivalent of like walking down and stepping in a tile and finding a heart piece or something, a heart container. I should say maybe that would be similar, but I think the combat is the main difference. I would think in the leveling up is the main difference between the two.
In addition to, I'll just add the overworld and the towns.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they're towns, and I think that's a good observation because you got a handful of towns in this one, which are named. If you play later Zelda games, they will sound very familiar to you. What they're named after.
Nice little reverse Easter egg.
And it's kind of cool because when you go into town, there's always a lady that fills your life, fills your magic. There's a wise man there that will like give you a spell, and then maybe a move. An old guy, an old fighter to give you a move. And once you learn that's the system. Oh, a new town! I can get a new move. You kind of get excited to go there. Zelda, there's not really a town in Zelda 1. Yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be until Link to the Past you get a town, and that was only one town. So that's a big difference.
Yeah. So if you had to pick, which do you prefer? Zelda 1 or Zelda 2?
Oh, I like that. I can say right now, like I like them both. It's usually the one I'm playing at the time. This game's great. I'm playing Zelda 1. I love this one. This is my favorite. I play Zelda 2. This is my favorite. But right now, if you were to ask me which one I'd play, it would be Zelda 2.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if it's because you're playing it now, and I'm like, I want to play Zelda 2 again. Or it's because I played Zelda 1 maybe a year or two ago. So that's kind of more fresh in my memory. Zelda 2, I haven't played in 2 years, I think. It's about 2 years now. I just don't know Zelda 2 as well as Zelda 1. I've only beat Zelda 2 3 times. So I kind of getting the itch to play it again.
Interesting.
Just talking about it's making me want to play it, yeah. But right now, Zelda 2. But But that's not to take any away from first Zelda. I mean,
No, of course.
still a
I
great
mean,
game.
you love them both. It's just this is the one that
Yeah,
if you were given the choice,
I
you would
just
play
yeah.
now.
Right now, yeah, I just hate picking one because they're both good to me.
Fair
I mean,
enough. I accept that
yeah,
answer.
yeah. Cool, good, thanks.
No problem. All right, so next question. Now we can go into more of the like the beginner's guide stuff. Somebody's a newcomer. They've never played Zelda 2. They don't know what they're walking into. What are some tips and tricks that you can give to newcomers to Zelda 2?
Follow the path. Enemies don't spawn, or they'll spawn, but you won't encounter. If you're on a path when you encounter an enemy, you won't fight anything. The paths lead to the first path leads you to the first town. There's also so follow the paths. Don't be afraid to go out of the way and die, because you're gonna die. So might as well just go with it, because you'll find stuff. You'll maybe find a heart container like we were discussing, and the world's not too big, so it's not like you're trekking. It's not like we're not talking about Breath of the Wild here, where you have to go for an hour somewhere. It's like when you die, you're going to get back to where you were at in 15 minutes, maybe tops. So don't be afraid to die. Just experiment with the game. Kind of go out and fight stuff. Get used to the combat. Get used to blocking with your shield with the little Octo Rocks. Go into the town. Talk to the people. Kind of because the first town is almost like the first little slice of the game. It's pretty much you'll do that about several times. Each town will have like a person to heal you, and then you'll have like the old man that teaches you a spell or a move, and that's pretty much happens throughout. Grind a little bit if you can at the beginning. Try to get your stuff up to maybe you want to go to level 2 for 2 things or something before you go to the first dungeon or so. There's no rush to beat the game, so just go to the first area, walk around, explore everything, and by the time you explore every part of that first area, go to the first place, you'll understand if this is something you want to play. Then maybe go on to the first dungeon and tackle that when you're ready to. There's no rush to do it. If that's something you get to it, you explore that whole area, fight, go to the first town. You're like, yeah, I want to stick with this. Then I think do the first dungeon, and then once you're done with that, yeah, you'll have a pretty good understanding if you want to play it or not. I think it's a hard game to just jump into, to just play for 15 minutes and then say, oh well, I didn't accomplish anything. Well, you got to play it for a little longer. Look at some, maybe not a guide to start off with, but look up the instruction manual, because it gives you enough to get. And then if that's something that interests you, because it's not going to be for everybody, especially this day and age. It has some rough parts to it. But I think if you can get past those rough parts and you enjoy it, I think it's a very rewarding game, which we discussed, and it's still a very good game. I think a lot of they hate, which is strange to me. I said I didn't have the game growing up, but this was a game that was talked very highly of. And I didn't really hear bad things about it until the internet. And that could be my own bubble, and like Nintendo Power always talking about it, probably was, but I always thought it was a very well-liked game, even from the little I was kind of surprised that people didn't really think highly of it, because I think it's a beautiful, one of the best NES games, and there's a lot of best NES games, but this is one of the most memorable, just for me playing it a little bit as a kid. It stuck with me enough to want to play it for the first time in 2015, and I played through it 2 more times, and I kind of want to play through it again. I think just the whole look and sound of the game is something that sucks you in. If you like, any like 8-bit NES style games, it's a very beautiful, good sounding, good looking game. The atmosphere is great. Just something about Zelda behind you, just there, is like kind of cool. Like always, you're starting and she's always there. That's kind of cool. I would say give it a shot and try it out. Read the manual, see if you kind of understand the game. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But I would say give it a shot, play it a little bit. You know, don't just write it off from what you hear that it's too hard, it's too obtuse. Because you can do it. I mean, God, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Unfortunately, during the entire time you were advising players how to play, I got caught up in with footage of two of my earliest encounters with iron knuckles, and you know how annoying those things are.
Oh, that was perfect timing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I did beat them in this footage, so and that horse
Yeah.
head boss. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to
Yeah, the
show
one
him
that
that.
yeah, that's good. That's good. That's perfect. I love that. I couldn't have be timed better.
We
But
kind of
what would
got
you
into it. I mean, kind of at your end there, but would you recommend Zelda 2 to newcomers? If so, like, who do you think is the right target audience for it?
like somebody who's never played are we talking never played a Zelda game or never played a video game?
We could talk anybody. I mean, you know,
Okay.
who would
I'll
or who
say
wouldn't you recommend Zelda 2 to?
I would say I'd recommend Zelda 2 to anybody who has an interest in Legend of Zelda, likes NES games, then definitely play Zelda 2 100%. And you haven't played it and you like Zelda 1, definitely 100%. If you haven't played it and you haven't played an NES game, it might be a little harder to recommend because you're jumping into a whole different world of games. If you're used to like newer stuff and you've never played an NES game, but you're interested in it, like somebody says, "Oh yeah, I've heard about Zelda 2." Um, be prepared. It's going to be different. If you never played a game from this era, it's going to be totally different than what you're thinking it's going to be. So maybe look at a little playthrough of it beforehand, see if it's something you want to jump into. I mean, I'm hesitant to say I'd recommend it to everybody because I got to be realistic here and say I can't. But if you're interested in it, I'd say definitely play it.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to be honest with this one because it's like 5 years ago, would I have recommended this game to myself? No, I tried it and I wasn't ready for this level of like
Exactly.
challenge. But
Hmm.
I'm a Zelda fan now, like
Yeah.
a big time Zelda. Like I'm really going in, like dedicate my whole channel to Zelda type Zelda fan, and it's like, no, I was ready to play it, and I was really pleasantly surprised. Like I didn't expect to like it this much.
Yeah, Keaton, I'm enjoying you playing this game. This is, and I'm like you got me the bug of wanting to play this again, just watching you play it. And I think that somebody has to want to play a game. You can't force a game. I don't hate it, but I don't like to overhype a game to somebody because I feel like sometimes that will push somebody off from playing it. And I want them to kind of like I can give my recommendation for it, but that's all I can do. You have to really want to. It's all up to you if you want to play it or not. I can't say, oh, you got to play this game because maybe I know me. If somebody says you got to play this, you got to play this, it kind of pushes me off of wanting to play it sometimes. If they keep saying it and saying it, and it's the same with this. I think if you have an interest in it, sure, play it. I can recommend it definitely, but you have to want to play it. I can't force it on you or anything like that. You gotta want to play it. If that makes sense.
I agree. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, final thoughts on Zelda 2.
Hmm.
I do
Zelda
have kind
Two
of a
is
question too, but go ahead. You got something. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Zelda 2 is probably the most misunderstood game, I think, on the NES. A lot of people hear it's too hard, it's too cryptic, and a lot of games on the NES were hard and cryptic. But there's something that's very rewarding about that, and it's no exception to Zelda 2. All the stuff in NES games you're getting in Zelda 2, you're getting great music, great graphics. I think it's a very beautiful game, like I mentioned. You're also getting the problems with it. You're getting the very hard combat sometimes. You're getting the getting sent back when you die. Um, but I think Zelda 2 still stands on its own as a very, very, very good game on the NES. One of the best. And I think if you give it a shot and you get sucked into it, you will end up loving it like I did. Like I said, I didn't play this much growing up. I played it in 2015, and since then I've beaten it 2 times. I want to play it again. You're experiencing it for the first time. It has its problems. Lots of games still do. Lots of games then did and had. Um, but there's something about it. It's still a Nintendo first-party game. Has that polish. Has that hook stuff that gets you hooked into the game. And I think that still holds up, and it's talked about, I think, very unfairly. I think a lot of people just hearsay what people say about it, and they kind of lump it in with that. I think if you give it a shot and you spend some time with it, you're going to get frustrated probably, and that's okay. But the reward you get out of it going through the game is pretty awesome. It's an experience that, when I finish a game, I like when it sticks with me and I'm thinking about it. Zelda 2 is a game. Zelda 1, a lot of games on NES are games that stick with me because there's ups and downs in them. They're not too long, but they have spikes that are very hard. And once you get through them, you're like, yes, I got through that. And Zelda 2 has a lot of parts where in the dungeons, you die in the dungeons and you get sent back, or there's these battles with all these iron knuckles, or the stupid bird guys that shoot the arc things in the palace that are a pain in the butt. But once you get past that stuff, it's all the sweeter on the other side, and I think Zelda 2 is one of the greats.
Well said. You mentioned remakes earlier, or bringing the style back. What exactly would you like to see?
We have top-down 2D Zelda, which is great. We have 3D Zelda. I think there's room for a 2D side-scrolling Zelda game. Maybe take the artwork like in Zelda 2's manual, where he has Link walking away from the Death Mountain or the castle, and then you see him with his shield and his sword. I don't know if you know that picture. Have that kind of like cel-shaded look. That'd be kind of cool. Just have a 2D Zelda RPG. That would be awesome. I want a 2D Legend of Zelda series, side-scrolling. That would be pretty cool. Almost like Wonder Boy or something like that. That'd be pretty awesome. I think there's room to explore that.
Do you think Nintendo could market that?
I don't think Nintendo's interested in doing that with Zelda right now. Maybe maybe after the shine wears off of Breath of the Wild, because that's all they're kind of sticking with. I don't think we'll get that. I'm kind of wishful thinking, but I think, Breath of the Wild's selling so well, I don't see that happening. So, but maybe the best we could hope for is a remake of the game in between big 3D Zeldas. Maybe they do a remake of it. And if that sells well, because they are remaking Zelda games, so they tend to do that. So you never know, maybe someday. And I hope if it happens before I'm retired, you can have me on and we can talk about it then.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. I have one final fun question to close on, and that is first I'm going to switch my media source here. If you, Brian of I Got Kings, were an NPC in Zelda 2 and Link arrives in your town, what would you say to him in your text box?
I'd say, Link, remember to jump up and swing your sword at the head of the iron knuckles instead of bashing them with your sword up or blocking everything with your sword and shield with your shield.
Brian, I'm putting you in the first town.
That would help out a lot.
Definitely. Thank you, Brian, as always. It was a pleasure. Viewers at home, check him out.
It was a pleasure for me. It was my pleasure to thank you for having me on. It was great. I love talking about Zelda 2 now, and I want to play it. So thank you. And I love watching you play it. It's really exciting.
Awesome.